Hey guys, it is the Drag Detective. Today I'm going to be starting a new series on this channel where I go through each season of RuPaul's Drag Race and talk about some of the production riggory that happens and kind of explaining why it happened. I think we all know that, yes, this is a reality competition show, but it also has a lot of elements that are produced, forced, whatever you may call it. And I think that season 12 is a great representation of this. There's a lot of really out there decision making going on and things that you're watching and you're like, how did this queen end up in the bottom? How did this queen win this challenge? They are trying to make a cohesive storyline, story arc throughout the whole season for these queens. So sometimes saving them from the bottom or giving them a little push for a win is necessary to make sure that those story arcs are completed or go in the direction that they want them to go. While I do get upset and I get annoyed at, some of the decisions that are made, I also can see why they decide to go in those directions. Also, this is a television show that is meant to, be seen by as many people. They want people talking about it. They want it, the hashtag to be trending. And things like hashtag Jan is robbed, it's getting them press. It might not be the best press. People might be mad and pissed, but they're getting a lot of free press just by making these little decisions that piss off the fan base because they all rush to Twitter, they all rush to Reddit or whatever and go berserk and everyone's talking about it. It's a huge frenzy. That episode is ingrained in everybody's mind because Jan was robbed. So I don't see them stopping it anytime soon. I think we're going to see the exact same amount of production riggory in season 13 and All-Star 6 and all the seasons coming up. Let's just go through each season one by one, starting with the latest main season, season 12, and I'll get into All-Stars probably later. Episode 1, we have the I'm That Bitch rap challenge and the fall and spring runway mini challenge. So for this first episode, I honestly don't see any riggory going on. I think that the top two of the week were Gigi and Widow, and they lip-synced, and Widow won the lip sync. I think that is all fair. I think they both did great in the runway. I think they both did great in the mini challenge. I think they both did great in the I'm That Bitch song. So everything here is pretty fair. I don't see any riggory going on. Episode 2, we have the You Don't Know Me Cell Block Tango challenge and the same mini challenge of fall and spring runways. The thing I'm going to note is Jan gets critiqued for being too much, trying to do everything. But Shitty Pie is how we're going to reference her on this channel. Shitty Pie did kind of the same thing. I mean, she's doing all kinds of stuff in her verse, making these weird voices and, all these weird little jokes, but she's not being seen as too much. Do I think that Shitty should have been in the top 2 over Jan? No, yes. I think that Jan and Shitty Pie both did really, really well in this challenge. And I think Jada deserved to be in the top regardless of who the other person was. I think they could have put Jan in the top 2. They could have put Shitty in the top 2. And the fact that they picked Shitty shows who they wanted to be the front runners of the season. So right off the bat, I think we see Jan was not meant for win after win this season, not meant to be the front runner. But overall, no real riggory in this episode, except for that one critique on Jan, which I think they just use as ammunition later when they throw her in the bottom for the first time. Episode 3 is, in my opinion, one of the biggest and most obvious examples of production riggory. And when I was watching it, I was like, because, I'm just going to say I read the spoilers on Reddit. I know what happens way before the episodes even air. I knew that Shitty Pie was supposed to win this episode, and I was watching the World's Worst challenge, which was basically the improv America's Got Talent or American Idol spoof. And I was watching this, and I'm like, the spoilers must be wrong, because there is no way that Shitty Pie is winning this challenge. She was in a group with Britta and Aiden, and they were fine. I think their sketch was kind of dumb. They did the best with it that they could. They did okay for what they were given, but I still don't think it was good. And I don't think that Sherry necessarily stood out among the three of them at all. I think that, honestly, Aiden did the best of the three. Then Shitty Pie wins. And I'm like, what sense does that make? And I remember going on Twitter and seeing everyone else with the exact same reaction. How the fuck did Shitty Pie just win that challenge? Because, in my opinion, it was very obvious that Heidi and Closet won this challenge. Her, Jackie, and Gigi did the best. I think they had the best skit. And I think that Heidi was so funny. Jackie was like a really close second. And I also think Widow did great in her sketch. So that should have been the top three. And Heidi should have won this challenge. And I think we all can kind of agree on that. So that is a very blatant example of production riggery. And I think that they gave Shitty this win because they wanted to set her up as the comedy campy queen, kind of like a Ginger Minge or kind of like a Eureka, like the big girl that can win these acting challenges and win these, comedy challenges. And then on the other side, the bottom three, I think was also rigged as hell because Crystal Method was horrific in this challenge. And her runway was the worst. Like, she had the worst runway. And I'm saying this as like a huge Crystal fan, but she had the worst runway, and I think that she did the worst. Dahlia was really bad, but like, at least Dahlia's runway wasn't terrible. I mean, it wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible. Crystal should have been in the bottom two. Nikki Doll, I mean, she wasn't great, but I thought she had a really good look. At least that was something that would, put her above Crystal and Dahlia, who had a terrible challenge and a terrible runway. I think after people loved Evie Oddly so much, she was the fan favorite, this, weird, quirky queen. Crystal was casted to be the Evie of this season, this queen that just is weird and doing things that haven't been done before. So losing her this early would have been crappy. I do think that if she was in the bottom here, she would have beaten Dahlia because, just watch the lip sync. But I don't think that they wanted to throw her in the bottom that quickly. So they decided not to put Crystal in the bottom and instead put Nikki Doll, who is kind of like someone they did not really care about, obviously, as they make her the butt of the joke because of her language barrier the whole season, which is kind of hard to watch. But obviously they wanted Crystal to be a front runner, and they didn't give a shit about Nikki Doll, so that is why Nikki lip synced and Crystal was safe. But I definitely think that Crystal totally 100% should have been in the bottom two. Okay, now episode 4, we have the first mini challenge that actually means something in this episode, which is they dress up like bees and they do a save the bees, but we're just going to dance. And these always just go to a queen that they want to set up a storyline for. And we can get into this more on other seasons where I think it's more obvious. This is the episode where they're like, we need to put Gigi in the spotlight. Kind of like how Shitty Pie was meant to win the comedy episode in episode 3. Gigi, the fashion queen, was meant to dominate the fashion episode. So giving her this little mini challenge win was kind of like giving her this dominance in this episode. Oh, she won the mini. Oh, she won the maxi. I thought that Jada should have won this episode, but I'm not going to say it's production riggery that Gigi won because I thought her looks were good enough. I wasn't a fan of her ball dress with, just the white dress with the balls on it. I wasn't a fan of it personally. I thought it was really ugly, but she did sew that entire underdress thing herself, which a lot of girls just wore a corset and stuck some balls to it, aka Jada, aka Aiden. So Gigi did more. She showed that she had the talent in sewing. And I think that her other two runways were good enough that it wasn't obvious that someone else definitely should have won this episode. I think that it was fine that Gigi won. I'm not going to say this is production awarding Gigi for something she didn't deserve. But also I think that she was winning this no matter what. They wanted to establish her as the fashion queen of the season. Then in the bottom, I think we have a little bit of riggery. The producers were seeing the storyline of Aiden starting to take form, where the other queens were kind of throwing her under the bus, saying you don't belong here, especially, Britta saying that to her after the World's Worst Challenge to amp up that storyline more, doing something like keeping Aiden from the bottom too when the queens said she didn't work hard enough. She, took a nap when they were all sewing. Her outfit was so boring. She didn't do anything. That just sets up a perfect narrative. Right now, Aiden is an underdog. Now the other queens all have this hatred for her because they're trying so hard and Aiden's being awarded for nothing. While I do think Aiden should have been in the bottom over Rockham, I think that, to really kick that story arc into gear. And, look at the next episode? That's what happens when everybody comes for Aiden, and that wouldn't have happened if they threw Aiden in the bottom two here, because she would have went home. So I do think this one, I see why they did it, and I think it made sense, and I think that it was a good decision. As much as I love Rockham Sakura, I do think keeping Aiden here was a good thing for the season as a whole, because that was the big dramatic moment of the season when everyone was coming for Aiden. We wouldn't have gotten that if Aiden went home here. All right, next we have the 5th episode of the season, which is Gay's Anatomy, an acting challenge. So Shitty Pie wins this episode, and she kind of had the Shea Coulee in the Kardashians' Rusical kind of role, where she kind of comes in randomly and is just there to say some funny shit and then leaves. I do agree here that Shitty should have won this challenge, because I think Widow did fantastic. I think Shitty did fantastic. And if you look at the runways, neither was jaw-dropping, but Widow's wasn't that great. I like the concept, but I just think it looked kind of cheap, whereas, Shitty's was pretty good. So I would have loved Widow to get her second win here, but I'm not going to say it's Riggory. I do think Shitty, probably deserved to win this challenge. And then the bottom two, this was rough because I don't think anybody really flopped this challenge. I think Nikki Doll probably did the worst, but, she still didn't do terrible. And we're going to see that kind of happen a couple times here, where in the season, everyone does good in a challenge, so it's who do you even put in the bottom? So Heidi's put in the bottom for her runway, and Nikki is put in the bottom for her performance in the challenge. And I do agree. Crystal could have been in the bottom, but I also thought she had one of the best runways of the night. So I don't think there was any production Riggory here. Episode 6, Snatch Game. It would have been a great time to disperse some wins, right? Gigi Good has won 2 challenges. 1 really, but technically 2. And Shitty Pie has won 2 challenges. So episode 6, we only have 4 queens that have won a challenge. We have Widow, Jada, Gigi, and Shitty Pie. So this would have been a great opportunity to bring another front runner in, and instead they just give the win again to Gigi, which, I guess I'm okay with. I don't think she did as good as people say she did. I think it was obvious that it was between Gigi Good and Jackie Cox as who was going to win the Snatch Game. And I think that they could have given this to Jackie and, really shown Jackie to be a front runner. She's done so well up to this point. I think she's been high almost every single week. So this would have been a great opportunity to give Jackie one, because I also think Jackie's runway was better than Gigi's. I know people live for this ice cream man look, but it literally is the same exact thing she wore in the ball, just a white dress, except she has some buttons on it and is carrying a big piece of ice cream. It's people look at this as a fashion moment, and I'm this is pretty basic, but I guess it's a skinny white queen wearing it. So anyway, they want to show that the fashion queen can still do comedy. She's versatile. So I get it. It's a little bit of production Riggory, but it's more of just which do you prefer? I prefer Jackie. And then bottom 3 were Britta, Crystal, and Aiden. And I think you had to put Britta and Aiden in the bottom together at some point, because they were at each other's throats for so much of the season. This was that time. I think really any 3 of them could have been in the bottom, but it's fine for Britta and Aiden. I think this is one of those things where the storyline that they wanted kind of just came to fruition, and they didn't have to do a lot of Riggory to make it happen, because Britta and Aiden both really sucked. So this episode didn't have a ton of Riggory, just they chose to give Gigi that win, I think, because they wanted to show her versatility. Now, the legendary, iconic Madonna Rusical that people to this day still talk about. So let's just talk about Jan as a whole. Jan Sport was one of the names that I knew before the season aired. And when the cast leaked, I was okay, I know Britta Filter and I know Jan Sport. And those are the only 2 queens that I'd heard of. So Jan was a pretty big name. They chose her to be the first queen revealed for a reason. She had a name. I was fully expecting her to be a front runner because she had such a big name, kind of like a Aquaria, kind of like a Brooklyn Heights. They do give Jan several high placements throughout the season. In Gay's Anatomy, they give her pretty good critiques in the first episode she's in, and then in this episode. I'm fully on the train that Jan Sport should have won the Madonna Rusical. If not just for the Rusical itself, also because of the runway. Gigi Goode, here's the thing. If a queen starts getting too oversaturated, people turn against them. And that is what happened in this episode with Gigi Goode. Gigi had won the very first episode with Widow. She won the ball. She won the previous episode, which was the Snatch Game. And now she won this episode. And if people start to feel like a queen, they don't deserve all the wins that they got, the fans will turn on them really fast. And I think that they were kind of seeing Gigi as this kind of Aquaria figure, this really young fashion queen who, you know, was starting to make a name for herself in LA, like Aquaria was in New York, and that people would love her. But that doesn't happen. People really turn against her in this episode. Obviously, she still had her fans, but a lot of people really turned against Gigi Goode this episode because she was given the win here. Because it wasn't seen as deserving, because there was another queen who people really liked that finally had her moment, the singer who just wanted to show everyone how good of a singer she was, does amazing in the singing challenge, and she's not given the win. Instead, the other queen who has been getting, you know, all this praise the whole season gets another win. And people just went insane. I mean, Twitter that night was everybody just saying, Jan was robbed, Jan was robbed. And like I said, that was a great marketing thing because I think that they had to have known people would have liked Jan and that, you know, she was hyping herself up as this singer the whole season. She was so excited for this challenge. She finally gets to the challenge. She slays it. And she doesn't win it. People, myself were like, how did this happen? The storyline was in their hands to give the singer the win and they didn't do it. And I don't know why they didn't. Because it could have really set up Jan as maybe this kind of late to the game front runner for a minute. And it could have set her up as this kind of likable queen who got her moment. She didn't have to make it to the end, but she got this. And instead, I think that they saw maybe that if they hyped her up so much for this challenge and they took it away from her, that she might crack. And we got the legendary Jan face crack, which they were right. And I'm not knocking Gigi. I think Gigi did really, really well this episode. A lot of the queens did really well. Widow, Crystal, Jada, they all did incredible. It was really hard to kind of pick apart who to win. But I think Jan's runway was so good. And I think Jan starting off the Rusical so strong was better than Gigi doing a backflip and wearing a bikini for the runway. Which is another thing. Gigi literally wore a bikini. That's all she wore. And she was praised. They were like, this is incredible. You look amazing. It's so simple, but it's so effective. And I'm just sitting here like, it's a blue bikini. And she's wearing some long nails and a blonde wig. I think that is one of the worst runways of the season because it has no character. It has it's literally just a bikini. That should have kept her from the win, just that. But no, she got the win. And people lost their minds, and all I can say is it made such a great moment. I guess smart on the producers. And then we have the bottom, which is Heidi and Britta. And this is another challenge where I think everybody, and especially this challenge, everybody did amazing in the Rusical. So it was hard to pick a bottom two. Heidi, again, I think her runway was the worst, so it makes sense to put her there. And Britta's storyline was kind of over at this point. Her and Aiden going at each other's throats was Britta's main storyline, and Aiden had gone home. Britta had won that battle, but now, she wasn't going to be a front runner at this point, so I think it was her time to kind of go. Also, I feel like maybe Shitty should have even been, low for this challenge. She did fine. She didn't really have a lot to work with, so kind of like a Thorgy moment where she did the best she could with what she was given, but I do think she could have been towards the bottom, and I would have been like, yeah. So, yeah, again, this is a big, glaring example of production riggery. And it just continues on with the next episode, which is Droop, a parody of Gwyneth Paltrow's Goop. She has these crazy remedies, these lifestyle things, where it's like you rub this horrific ointment with all kinds of these weird things in it, and suddenly you'll find nirvana. It's these, crazy things that are definitely just scams, but people are going to pay thousands of dollars from it because Gwyneth Paltrow tells them it's real. So that was the premise, and not many people actually, I think, knew that. I think Heidi had the best commercial by far because she understood what the parody part of the challenge was supposed to be parodying. She has this Tears of a Drag Queen lotion, and honestly, I think Jan also, I don't think her commercial was great, but I think that her idea was what they were kind of looking for. It was she had a like a style spray that'll like change your personality when you spray yourself, which is very goop. And other than that, I don't think a lot of queens kind of got what they were really supposed to be going for. But some of them, like Crystal and like Jackie, just had a really good commercial, so it didn't really matter. But I think that for the queens that were, I don't think did well, that I don't think their commercials worked, Gigi Good, Jan, Shitty Pie, and Widow Von Du. I think that Jan had the best idea, especially Widow and Sherry's. Like, it wasn't really a concept. It wasn't like a product, especially Shitty Pies. I mean, hers made no sense. Shitty 100% should have been in the bottom two this episode because her commercial, I didn't even know what the product was. I was like, a pie, and it's supposed to read your aura, but it's a pie, so I think Shitty and Widow definitely could have been in the bottom here, but I also feel like Gigi could have been in the bottom here. I think that Gigi's runway probably saved her, but I also think that Shitty and Widow had amazing runways. So all of the bottom four, I think, had great runways, and any four of them really could have lip synced and been in the bottom, and I would have been like, cool. But I do think that Jan had at least the concept of what the challenge was, and the other three not so much. Obviously, Sherry and Gigi have been set up as the fashion queen and the comedy queen, and they're the front runners. So there was no way that they were going to be put in the bottom, at least this early. Whereas Jan, obviously the week before, showed that producers did not see her as a front runner. They weren't going to be giving her any free passes. And Widow, for whatever reason, they just, at this point, they just threw Widow to the dogs. And so, Widow sends Jan home. And like I said, I don't think that Jan and Widow didn't deserve to be in the bottom, but I think that Gigi and Sherry also deserve to be in the bottom. So kind of rigging this episode because they had their front runners and they kept them both out of the bottom. But I do think that Jan and Widow also didn't do well and, did deserve to lip sync. So it's kind of like a gray area here again. And then we have Choices 2020, which is the assassination of Widow Von Du for absolutely no reason. Widow should not have been in the bottom. I think Widow was one of the best in the challenge. And they rip Widow to shreds and they throw her in the bottom. And that is complete riggery. I think that because, again, Gigi and Sherry did terrible. I think Gigi had the absolute worst performance of this episode. And she also had the worst runway. It was like they couldn't put Gigi there. They couldn't put Shitty there because, she's not the best lip syncer. What if she loses? Jackie and Widow were their kind of sacrificial lambs at this point. Also, okay, so for this, the debate, we have Shitty Pie doing another old lady character, which this is her third one. We have Gigi doing her kind of robot, hey bitch thing for the third time. And they're not really read for it, but we have Jackie, who was read for doing this, like, character that she came up with, which is this, like, secret Canadian who accidentally keeps outing herself as Canadian, and they're like, wow, you kept doing the same thing over and over again. It really fell flat. But Shitty and Gigi keep doing that same character every week because we love it. And can we just say, like, Gigi did terrible in the challenge. The runway was Stars and Stripes. She wore a British uniform that had no stars and no stripes. It was just red, white, and blue. Which, I forgot to mention, she also, during the Buttons and Bows runway, did not wear bows, and no one said anything. But whatever. I think she had the worst runway. It didn't even fit the category. And then you have Widow and Jackie, who are wearing two political statements. Widow is wearing black stars and stripes, and Jackie is wearing a Stars and Stripes hijab, and those are the two that they put in the bottom. It's just not a good look, and I think that they wanted Jackie to maybe have that moment of lip syncing in the hijab because it would be powerful to watch, and like it was, but it would have been more powerful to just have her be safe and throw a Shitty Pie in the bottom instead of her. But whatever. On the other side, Jada wins, and I think this was like an obvious Jada should have won this challenge. So yeah, another episode where we just see how much they didn't want Shitty or Gigi in the bottom two. And also, we saw how terrible at lip syncing Gigi was from the first episode when she did Starships against Widow and just kind of, convulsed. So I think that they were worried putting Gigi and Sherry in the bottom after they had already lost a lip sync in their premiere episodes. They might actually lose the lip sync and they would have to send them home. Just keeping them out of the bottom two is the safest option. We do lose Widow Von Du, who, like I said, I think she did one of the best performances of the week. I think she could have been in the top over like Heidi or Crystal, and instead they, threw her in the bottom. Let's move on to episode 10, which was the makeover episode. I really thought that for Crystal's storyline, because she's this kind of quirky queen who does these really weird runways and these really weird choices, I thought this should have been Crystal's episode to win. She comes out in these Bert and Ernie looks, and it's just so out there and so crazy, but it somehow works. I was fine with Jada winning because I thought that she looked great. I thought her makeover partner looked great, but it also was just kind of like something we've seen before, whereas Crystal was doing something completely new, completely out of the box, something only Crystal would do. And I do think that Crystal should have won this challenge, but Jada wins. And I do think that Jada, at this point, is someone that production wants to see in the end. And I think that we can see that, especially in this episode, because it could have been Crystal, it could have been Jada, and they chose Jada for a reason. And then we have the bottom two, which are Jackie and Heidi. And I know that some people like Jackie in this lip sync, but I thought it was so cringy. It was so, she did the same thing over and over and over and over again, which was her critique the week prior. So now we have Jackie doing the same thing that she did the previous week, which is doing a very one-note performance, taking one funny thing and beating it into the ground. And suddenly they're like, this is the greatest lip sync ever, double Shantae, that was hilarious, Jackie. And I'm like, make it make sense. Like, you literally read Jackie for this the week prior. I think that Jackie 100% should have gone home this week. But for whatever reason, I think they wanted her to stay. Maybe because she'd been so outspoken and had said so many powerful things about the Middle Eastern community, and they didn't want to send her home. But they threw her in the bottom the week before, so I don't know. For whatever reason, they really wanted Jackie to stay. And I don't think she should have. I think she should have gone home here. I think Heidi very obviously won this lip sync. So I think that they needed to fill this double Shantae spot, and they were getting towards the end of the season, and so let's just use it now. Let's just use it on Jackie. We don't want Jackie going home right now. That's my best guess of why they used it. So now we have the 11th episode, which is their One Queen shows. Crystal gets her win here. I fully agree. Crystal did really, really well this week, and she had been doing so well every single week. This was like her upwards trajectory. Gigi and Jada and Heidi do not so well in their performances. And then you have Shitty Pie, who does really well. The audience cracks up through her entire thing. But I think she goes 12 minutes over the 5-minute time slot that they had. They each had 5 minutes for their performances. And I think Shitty Pie went 18 minutes. Which, to me, that means you're automatically in the bottom. Automatically. Because this was the challenge. I don't care how well you didn't meet the challenge. So you're in the bottom. But I guess that they could justify keeping her out of the bottom because her set was funny. And she's the comedy queen. And, the comedy queen slayed, so what are we going to do? Put her in the bottom? Yes. She already should have been gone by now, honestly. But people already hated Shitty because obviously her actions outside of the show. But also for getting the win in World's Worst, which people were like, why? And for even getting the win in her first episode, where people were like, why didn't Jan get the win? So this just was more ammunition for people against Shitty Pie, which, it just shows how production can have an idea of how people are going to feel about a queen. They think people are going to rally around Gigi like they did Aquaria. People think that they're going to rally around Sherry like they did Ginger Minge or Eureka, and that didn't happen. And they can try and force it all they want, but I feel like it has to come naturally. People, the fans of the show will naturally gravitate towards who they want. I don't think that Jada was going to win this season from a production standpoint. I think that was probably going to be Shitty Pie winning this season, I think. And if it wasn't her, it would have been Gigi. But obviously, Shitty was shitty, and Gigi people turned against because she didn't have a good attitude, and she was entitled, and she was ignorant, and she was pushed so hard by production. People didn't like it. So someone like Jada, who all of her wins, I feel like she deserved to win. She wasn't pushed. She was really genuine, and she was really not overproduced. She felt real, and I think that's why people love Jada so much. That's why she deserved to win. I do think you could have thrown Shitty in the bottom here instead of Heidi. I think Jada did the worst. And Heidi's wasn't great, but she had a really good concept at the very least. But Heidi goes home here, and I think it was good to see Jada in the bottom. I think if a queen coasts, all the way through, not having to fall into the bottom, we don't see that vulnerability of, that emotional moment where they're fighting for their life. I think fans need to see that to really rally around them. So I think this was actually a good thing for Jada to be in the bottom here. But yeah, still more Riggory against, in favor of Shitty Pie. And then we have the penultimate episode, the Viva Drag Vegas. It was kind of weird because in season 11, which was the other season that had a top 5 kind of musical performance challenge, there was no winner. Evie was the obvious winner, but she wasn't given a win. And the bottom 2 were in the bottom because one's verse wasn't good and one's performance wasn't good. Here, I don't think anybody did bad. I think that Shitty did the worst, but I think they all did good. There wasn't a clear, these two were going to be in the bottom. And I don't think there was a clear winner either. I think that everyone did equally good, except for Shitty, who did a little bit not as good. Instead of, not giving a win again like they did the previous season, they're like, oh, who hasn't been in the top for a while? Gigi Good. People are going to forget that we want her to win. So we're going to give Gigi Good a win here. Even though we haven't done that before. Season 9, we didn't give the win to Shay. In Season 10, we didn't give it to Aquaria. In Season 11, we didn't get to Evie. But we need to remind everyone how good Gigi is again because she was in the bottom for a couple weeks. So Gigi Good, you're the winner of this challenge. And the 2 that have the lowest track records up to this point, Jackie and Crystal, you'll be in the bottom. Based on spoilers, we know that they filmed both Jackie and Crystal going home. So that whoever had the lowest fan support was probably going to go here. And obviously that was Jackie. So Crystal makes it to the finale. And here we are. Grand finale. Gigi Good almost gets disqualified because they had to film from their home, and Gigi rented out a studio and had a bunch of people helping her during a pandemic. I think if Gigi wasn't winning because of the fan reaction, she now wasn't winning because of that. So Jada does great. Jada wins. And at least that wasn't rigged. At least the person who really deserved to win this season won the season. Because, this is a long-ass video because there is so much production Riggory going on. And like I said, I don't think it's a bad thing. I just think it's a thing. And I'm just here to talk about it and maybe give you guys some insight as to why. What are the whys of why production would do these things. And like I said, it doesn't always work out in their favor. Pushing Shitty Pie and Gigi Good so much turned the fandom against them. The person that they didn't really push at all, who fully deserved all the wins that they got and didn't get any special treatment, was the winner, and deservedly so. So there was all of the rigged moments from Season 12 of Drag Race. Like I said, no hate towards any of these queens, unless your name is Shitty Pie. This is just my observations, the observations of Twitter and Reddit. I'm excited for this series. The next episode in the series, before I go to Season 11, because I am going to go cycle through all the seasons, I'm going to say, here's how Season 12 would have went if there weren't any Riggory, and maybe see how different it would have been. And would it have been better? Would it have been worse? So that's what we're going to do next. Until then, make sure to subscribe, like this video, and comment below what episode pissed you off the most. What form of Riggory from that I mentioned here really made you the most upset. And if you feel like I missed something, let me know. I would love to hear your opinions if you think that something that I said was rigged wasn't, or something that I didn't say was rigged was. I would love to hear your guys' opinions. I want this to be a conversation, not just me talking to you guys and telling you guys what to think. Thank you so much for watching. And it's been a long day of trying to figure out why the fuck these people wanted Shitty Pie to win. So I'm gonna go watch some Jada Essence Hall fan cams, and I'll talk to you guys later.